Welcome to the Cultural Channel, where we appreciate, analyze, and amplify culture. In this upcoming series, we are going to be looking at culture through the lenses of family. And we are very privileged and thankful to have special guests today that will be talking to us about the gift of cross-cultural marriage. So I just want to encourage you to get a drink or some snacks and to relax and to enjoy this episode.
Yeah, I am Chinese American, and depending on how you do the counting, I'm either second or third generation Chinese American. My mother was born in, she's ethnically Chinese, but was born and raised in Indonesia. She came to the United States as an international student. My grandmother was, on my dad's side, was actually born in Southern Illinois. And my dad was born and raised in St. Louis. And then they met in St. Louis and moved out to California. And I was born and raised in Southern California. So I am ethnically Chinese American.
Yeah, so I am white American. And my ancestors came from different parts of Europe. So Germany and Sweden and Scotland. And the closest generation would have been my great grandparents on one of the sides from Sweden. You want to go first?
Sure. I grew up in to give a little bit more background. So I grew up in a Chinese church, and so predominantly an immigrant generation church. And so in Southern California, fair number of Asian Americans, lots of Asian Americans. And so with my cultural background, my mother being born and raised in Indonesia, being ethnically Chinese, but born and raised in Indonesia, my dad being ethnically Chinese, but born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri, have always felt I'm very much in between cultures in a lot of ways. And so then going to church and recognizing that there were other kids my age and that didn't share that same cultural hodgepodge, so to speak. Their parents were both spoke the language and they spoke the language, and that was a big kind of barrier in a lot of ways. And so I know that internally there was a certain level of just desire to sort of prove myself to be Chinese in some ways. And one of the ways where it manifested itself was that I even kind of internally said, well, even if I can't be full-blooded Chinese, at least my kids can be full-blooded Chinese. So originally, I didn't even know that I had these biases until I had met Megan and was like, oh, well, this is someone who I enjoy talking to, and she's very attractive and fun and loves Jesus and all those things. And what's stopping me from asking her out and starting to date and those sorts of things? And it really was this internalized thing, I need to marry a Chinese woman so that my kids won't have to go through the same thing that I had to go through, which is constantly feeling like you need to be proving your Chineseness, so to speak. And so God did some good work in me and was able to break down a lot of that and just some healing in those spaces. And so we knew each other for about a year before I actually asked her out. And that was a lot of that was, the joke is that the reason why it took us so long for knew each other when we started dating is because neither one of us thought that I was attracted to non-Asian people. God had to kind of do some work there, and I'm super glad that he did.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that kind of explains on my side a little bit too. We both met through being staff on InterVarsity, and so we were both in Missouri, but in different towns, but we still saw each other through friends and through work, and so we were friends. And I did come to like him, but I knew that he didn't at that point want to pursue a relationship with anyone that wasn't Asian or Asian American. And so I kind of had put that aside, even though I liked him at that point. So it wasn't until later. From my side, I grew up being taught to, that all people are the same regardless of your culture. And so part of that is some color blindness, right? And so there wasn't any opposition from my family in dating Adam or any Asian American in that sense. So I didn't have any hesitations about that as we went into our relationship. Yeah. Well, I think seen a lot of advantages and just, it's a gift really to be able to participate in two different cultures and figure out what that means, especially as we have family and kids and what are the pieces of both of our cultures that we want to bring in. I think also it helps point out a cross-cultural marriage or relationship also helps point out blind sides or like blinders even. I think especially for me as a white American, there are different, living in the majority, there are a lot of things that I just took for granted as this is just the way that you do it, right? Even though I had also been getting to know people of different cultures for a very long time, like when you are in a closer relationship, those things you can't go and hide from it, or you can't retreat to your own comfort zone. And so it helps, I think, really grow you in figuring out what are things that are in me that should change, right? And that, or my own biases, my own ethnocentrism in a lot of ways of how I just think things should be. So I think that's a gift in that to help grow as a person, and for me as a follower of Jesus to help grow in seeing different aspects of even who Jesus is through a cross-cultural relationship that goes deeper. And that could also be a friendship too, that maybe is a deep friendship, right? And I think in choosing to live with someone for the rest of your life, you're having to confront the differences and also invite God into that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think for me, again, growing up in a predominantly, my friend circle was predominantly Chinese American, and even in high school, I had a lot of Asian American friends, and so in any marriage, there's going to be, or any relationship, there's going to be some cross-cultural things that are going to happen, just in terms of like people are different, right, and like have their own differences. But I think particularly being cross-cultural this way has helped me to identify, well, how many of those things are just because you're you, and how many of those things are actually like because like that's the Chinese value, or that's a Chinese American value, or those sorts of things. And so to be able to get that sort of perspective that I wouldn't necessarily have had if I was married to another Chinese American person, they would just be like, oh, we're just different people. But now I get to see a little bit more like, oh, that's actually like a Chinese thing, and that's a thing that is that's there. I think I personally become a lot more that recognition has helped me become a lot less rigid and maybe more flexible in how I do some things, because I'm learning the difference between what's the difference between something being different and something being wrong, or something, those sorts of things. So a great example of that is what do we call each other's parents? What do we call our in-laws? And in Chinese American culture and Chinese culture, really, like my instinct is to call her parents mom and dad, because that's just the thing that you do. And in white culture, the instinct, like that would be really weird for her parents to do. And so for me, like having to learn, like it's okay to call them by their first names. I'm not disrespecting them. I'm not like showing them that I'm better than them or anything like that, which would totally be the case if I tried to do that with, like, if I was married to a Chinese woman or a Chinese American woman, then like try to do that, like, why would you do that sort of thing? And so just learning that, no, that's not a better or worse way. It's just a different way of addressing the in-laws, and it's totally cool and it's totally valid. I think a second thing that's been a real advantage is that it allows for personal interaction. I think particularly with Megan and her family being white and whatnot, and there's a lot of cross-cultural tension in the country right now. And so it would be really easy for me if I was in a homogeneous community to just to other. It would be really, really easy to other. But because I am in relationship with Megan, that by extension means with her entire family, there is a sense of softening in some ways, or at least an empathy that comes along with oh, I understand that this is I know white folk. I love white folk. That's a very real thing. And so not to say that I wouldn't do that otherwise, but it's made all the more real by spending holidays together and by talking with and seeing them on FaceTime or those sorts of things on a regular basis, and going up to visit and having them come down to visit, that sort of thing. My proximity to white folk in a very relational way is way more frequent because of the fact that I'm married to a white person. And that's something I think that has only been an advantage.
I think getting to help them see different cultures and that their even dual identity in different ways, it's kind of it's in partnership with them and helping, because both of us are not both, they are the both. Yes. Right? So in ways we don't know what their experience is like, and in ways we do. And so helping, I think it's fun to see them get to take part in different pieces of our families, and even just, for example, different names of what you call big brother or big sister, little brother, little sister. For me, that is fun because those are things that I didn't have, right? And so it's fun to see those traditions being passed on from Adam's family, or how you celebrate different holidays, or some different holidays that I didn't celebrate before, right? Chinese New Year, and seeing some of those pieces. So I think it's a joy to see them get to take part in both of those, and also helping them grow in their identity. I mean, our kids are 5, 3, and 9 months, so we haven't gotten that deep into it, right? But you still see different aspects of helping them see they're both Chinese and white, right? And what does that mean? And just the openness of talking about that from an early age, I think is beautiful too, to help them grow in who God made them to be.
Yeah, and there's a certain level of adaptability, I think, as well, that the kids have developed. So they are perfectly comfortable using, I mean, they can't really use chopsticks, but they at least, have the trainer, the trainer chopsticks that they can use, and they're perfectly happy doing that. They're also perfectly fine using spoon, fork, knife kind of situation. They love mac and cheese, but they also love Chinese rice porridge, and there's a certain level of adaptability. They just have their what is possible has been expanded for them in a lot of ways. And some of this is just grandparents, but also some of this cultural, is that when they know that when they go to Grandma and Papa's house, which is Megan's parents, that they're gonna have certain experiences that are going to be more traditional European American kind of thing. They don't know it necessarily. They just know these are the things we do at Grandma and Papa's house, and these are the things that we do at Ama and Gungung's house, and how these are the foods that we eat is a really big part of that as well. And I think there's a certain level of adaptability that they have that my hope is that that'll serve them well later, is being able to go in and through different experiences and not freak out because things are different than what they're expecting.
I hope you have enjoyed this episode on the gift of cross-cultural marriage and relationship. And I would love to encourage you to send your question or comment in the section below. Our next episode will be on the five love languages. And the question that we have for you is, do you think that the list of the five love languages will expand through the lenses of culture, or it will shrink? So this is for our next episode. So again, make sure that you subscribe and stay tuned. Thank you again for listening.